Until Dawn. If you are like most people, you likely think of the hit 2015 horror game that took the gaming sphere to new heights, especially when it comes to storytelling and decision-making. Not to say that Until Dawn was the first game to do this, as Heavy Rain came out years prior and had very similar mechanics. Arguably, a lot more thinking back on it. But we're not here to talk about Heavy Rain, or even Until Dawn the video game, but Until Dawn the movie that just released a couple days ago, and you just know me and Mr. Minus had to go see it. Right off the bat, I will say I was among the minority of people that actually wasn't really bothered by the change in direction the movie was going for. To me, it felt like no matter what this movie tried to do, it wasn't going to work for a lot of people. You either recreate the story one-to-one, which means you have to select the quote-unquote right choice, which not everyone is going to agree with, or you can try something different. And based off the trailers, I thought that this new concept they were going for was something I could get behind. It wasn't following the Until Dawn story, but I liked the idea that our group of characters were going to be treated kinda like video game characters where they all reset after they are killed. You can kinda look at this movie like a gory, R-rated Jumanji horror movie. Take that as you will. Something that really compelled me to go see this movie was the director, David F. Sandberg. I appreciate that he still keeps up with his YouTube channel even after making his break into big-budget filmmaking. But when it comes to what I actually thought about Until Dawn after seeing it, I gotta say, I liked it. By all means, I wouldn't say it's great or anything, but I wouldn't pair it with some other big stinky video game movies. As some of you may have heard before, the first half of this movie is really strong. I actually think it only starts to fall apart in the last 20-ish minutes or so, but I can understand how other people start to lose interest earlier. And by fall apart, it just seemed like the story started to lose focus once it came time for things to wrap up neatly. However, like I said earlier, I was really only looking to get some cool slasher kills and to just honestly be entertained. And I feel like I got that at the end of the day. Obviously, when looking at this movie as a comparison to Until Dawn, it doesn't really stand close. But the movie also isn't really trying to be. The cast of characters in the movie are admittedly one-dimensional, but I still found enjoyment out of them. But it was unfortunate that they mostly turned into punching bags I was waiting to see brutally get killed. Which leads to probably the biggest thing holding this movie up from the rest. Even when it comes to other horror movies, I'd say. Which would be its violence. If you're like me, you just can't help but appreciate it when directors actually strive to do things as practical as possible. And I feel this movie shows why that is still important. You can see the practicality behind a lot of the kills, and it adds so much. Considering how many horror movies rely on CGI these days when it comes to its violence and gore, it's refreshing when movies like this come along and show how it's done. When it comes to complaints I have with the movie, it mostly boils down to the characters not being fleshed out at all, really besides maybe the main character. Plus a handful of decisions that were made that I didn't feel make a lot of sense. Once the movie starts to wrap up, it does start to also try and explain a lot of what is going on, and that's where I could see the movie definitely losing people. But unfortunately, it's hard to really get into the negatives without getting into spoilers. So for now, I'll hand the mic over to Mr. Minus to share his spoiler-free thoughts on the movie before we unleash the spoiler floodgates.
As Mr. Plus said, when I heard there was an Until Dawn movie being made, I was admittedly quite skeptical. It felt strange Until Dawn was jumping ahead of so many other horror franchises that have so much more potential as a horror movie. Games like Dead Space, Outlast, and even Soma seem like they'd be more likely to get the movie treatment before Until Dawn. But that isn't to say the game itself was bad. In fact, I quite liked the game when it first came out. But I feel the idea of a movie ruins the magic of its concept. The game has, admittedly, many cheesy and cringy moments, but it can get away with it because the game itself is supposed to be a parody of B-level horror movies. The advantages of Until Dawn lie in the fact that it is a video game. It allows the player to essentially play a movie director with the lives of its middle-aged actors playing teenage cast being in their hands. The game also has the advantage of being long, as it's longer than 4 hours, which means it can be even more clever in its writing due to a longer runtime. You're really playing an interactive movie or TV show. If you try to make it into a movie, you now take away the viewer's freedom, and now must compress the storyline into basically a quarter of the runtime. Until Dawn had plenty of arcs from slashers, ghosts, monsters, and even saw traps, but it all fit together and they all played off each other well due to it being allowed to have a longer runtime. As for movies, well, people complain about the runtime of Oppenheimer, so you really can't do the game that much justice. But the alternative is to then break away from the source material, which I am open to. Mr. Plus said it earlier, even if we could compress that many hours into a movie runtime, you're essentially going to have to canonize someone's playthrough of the game. And again, the interactive element is very important to the genius of the game. But when you break away, well, why did you even use the name Until Dawn at that point? It's a lose-lose situation. You either are met with the impossible task of making a satisfying adaptation of a game that thrives off of a non-linear format, or you have to completely abandon the source material, which will leave many confused or even angered at the use of its title. But let's ignore that. We're here to talk about the movie after all. So what did I think? Well, I'm very mixed on this movie. The movie has a bit of a Happy Death Day x Cabin in the Woods x Final Destination thing going on. And yes, the introduction of the concept of being caught in this brutal time loop was pretty nice. But I was a bit disappointed we only saw a handful of the time loops. Don't get me wrong, they were cool when they lasted, but when the movie suddenly reveals we basically can't revert the save anymore, it almost felt like we got cut off just short of all the fun we were having. After that, it really feels like the movie has no hook anymore. The pull goes from escaping the time loop to just your plain old "we will die if we don't escape" consequences. The movie was bold to take itself away from the game, especially with such a neat concept, but it didn't feel like it met its full potential, almost as if we got the free subscription version of this movie. The references to the game, like some of the villains and some imagery, was nice, but it felt a bit more surface level than like the writers actually understood the game that they were trying to adapt. The movie does have enough callbacks to the game that will likely satisfy some fans, but even then it's hard to say fans will be able to overlook the departure if it isn't going to commit to the concept entirely. On a brighter note, the violence was indeed the best part of the movie. There were a few kills that did make me jaw drop, and I will say I'm happy this movie committed to being R-rated at least. There's plenty of gore on screen that I feel makes it stand out from your average horror movie. If it was PG-13, this would have been a disaster. It may sound like I really didn't like this movie, but that's not true. When the movie was playing to its concept and having fun with all the violence, I was actually quite entertained. I feel like if this movie was thrown on while you and the friends pop a few beers, or sodas if you're juniors, you'd have a lot of fun. The story and characters are pretty lifeless, but the violence and initial hook will keep you entertained if for nothing else. I guess my real issue is, I feel more disappointed with the movie. This doesn't feel like the best version of the Until Dawn movie we could have gotten. It could have used a couple more rewrites, and it might have been a pure classic. I guess I'd rather watch this than the majority of video game adaptations, but I'd also rather watch a lot of other horror movies than this one in general. I'd give this movie a 6 out of 10. It was cool to see Peter Stormare again.
At the end of the day, if you're looking for a faithful adaptation of Until Dawn, you are going to be disappointed, sadly. However, if you are open to the shifts the story takes, or just want to see some classic horror thrills and kills, you may just be able to find enjoyment out of this movie like I did. I'd say I would give this movie an exact 7 out of 10, like it just barely earned the 7 in my eyes. It's a good time, but that also means I will likely only put the movie on if I'm looking to shut my brain off for some mindless B-horror fun. However, it's now time for me and Mr. Minus to get into the spoiler part of this Until Dawn review. So this is your final warning if you still haven't seen the movie and plan on checking it out.
So I feel if we're going to be talking about this movie, let's get like the best thing out of the way first, which is I'd say the best kills of this movie. Now I'm pretty sure you already know what my favorite kill is, mostly because I predicted it was going to be your favorite kill too, and I think I was right when I said that. But so for me, the best kill was that initial water explosion kill where he. So if you haven't seen the movie and you just care to hear what we have to say about it, guys, basically, I think it was like the second or third loop they were on at that point. Mm-hmm. So they were a little scared. They barred themselves up in the bathroom trying to make a game plan. One of them coughs a little bit and he drinks some water, or he drinks water because the situation is stressful. And then he starts to cough mid-conversation, and I'm not gonna lie, I was thinking it was gonna be something like the alien, or like a parasite, or like he was gonna like throw up his lungs or some shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I was thinking it was gonna be more so like some type of sickness infection. Lo and behold, he just blows the fuck up right after that, and that one really caught me off guard. I was not expecting him to blow up at all. So but yeah, that was one scene in the movie where I thought, like, all right, this movie's actually pretty fucking cool, because it was just the most random thing. Like, yeah, the water just turns you into a time bomb, I guess. Yeah. You know,
I liked the first blow up was awesome. My favorite of the blow ups was probably the last one with that one girl where her leg blew up, and then she was crawling, and then her stomach filled up, and then that popped. because that was even worse.
That was horrible, dude.
I really like, well, one of the first kills I think is that one guy getting his eye stabbed. So he got stabbed through the skull. That's cool, and then his eye came out with it, and I was like, all right, that's even better. And then the other practical kills would have been the split in half. Well, a lot of them were practical. I think most of them were. The guy getting split in half at the beginning, and then our slasher getting his head caved by the sledgehammer at the end. Those were the standouts.
The sledgehammer kill was actually pretty cool. Yeah, I'd say I don't know if like I probably should have expected it when it came down to the violence portion of it, but I was actually quite shocked with just how the kill with like the sledgehammer to like the killer's face was, because I was expecting it to just like hit him across the skull and like, I don't know, you see some blood come out, but like no, you see his brain, like matter and tissue like come out. I was like, oh my god. Yeah.
Brain gets smashed.
That was a pretty wild one on that one. And like you said, the eye kill with like the very first kill, that one was pretty gnarly. It's always the eye kills, you know, once they add the eyeball, like it's always the nasty ones at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think I thought the initial kill of the dude like getting split in half was interesting
that
too.
Was like the entry.
Yeah, he got like fucking Darth Mauled. I thought that was pretty interesting on that end. But I mean, it wasn't necessarily, it was hard to watch, but I mean, it was kind of a nice peek, I guess I'd say, for like the future and like what's going to be coming into this movie and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It's like I was kind of saying in the spoiler-free part where like it's so clear when a kill is done practically versus when they try to put in visual effects for it, and this movie is so evident of it, because even again, that scene where her stomach fills up, like that was gross, and then when it popped out, I was like, oh my gosh, that I hate how practical that looks.
You know, I will also say this too, like I'm not sure if they used, because like I'm pretty sure they used a little bit of CG and stuff like that, but even like some of the CG here wasn't too bad. Like the scene like in the phone, like where they were looking through the dude's phone to like see their previous kills. Like there was a couple scenes there where I couldn't tell if that was CG, not like in a bad way where it's like that looks shitty. Is that CG? More like as in that doesn't look like that could have been done practically. Was that CG?
Yeah.
So that was really good. You know what I mean? Like the Wendigos in particular, I thought were interesting. Like, because I was thinking, like, I couldn't really tell if that was, like, a CGI or if, like, they just had somebody in, like a suit, like, similar to, like, The Descent, you know?
I think they were. I think they were in suits and makeup. Well, at least maybe some or most. Maybe in some scenes they were CGI'd, but when they were close up,
something we can probably Google there.
It really looked like pure. But speaking of Wendigo, this is probably going to be what pisses the most people off.
I know what you're talking about.
The Wendigo's lore gets kind of changed, because if I remember correctly in the game, it's you start eating people and then you go crazy, or you're like driven to the desperation of cannibalism, and then you start to lose your mind and you turn into the Wendigo. But in this movie, the Wendigo is the final form they take after like the time loop. Essentially, I'm explaining that badly. After they go through the time loop enough times, there's going to be an end point, and they essentially, after being dealt all the stress and violence, they turn into Wendigos. And so
that's pretty much what that means. Yeah,
they kind of kept the insanity part, like you start losing yourself and you turn into Wendigos, but the cannibalism is completely taken out, or at least not mentioned. I guess it could be left open if they wanted to do something with it later, but they don't outright be like, the cannibalism is not the reason, but they don't really say that at all.
That was something that disappointed me in the movie, because I mean, the Wendigo, if you haven't played the game, that's like the big bad at the end of the game. Like that's kind of how it goes. Like not like as an end game, but more so like the Wendigo is primarily the main villain of the game. So to see what was primarily the main villain kind of just get like its origins torn apart, it was a little like unsatisfying, especially because the game itself included, at least from what I have been informed and I believe to be, is like it was more so based in Native American folklore as opposed to like it being a movie magic thing.
Mhm.
Like, a Wendigo was like a curse in a way. It was like a mystical thing that happened to you if you committed such a horrible act in such sacred land. But like you said, the movie just turns it into a convenience where it's like, oh yeah, and then you become a Wendigo if you stay here long enough, which honestly, you could have used any other name and it probably wouldn't have been that much different.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't, the look resembles the Wendigo from the video game, but the lore doesn't really match. I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of a good that's kind of a good analogy for this whole movie, is that there is a lot of looks with it when it comes down to how it's similar to Until Dawn, but it doesn't really capture the deeper stuff that made Until Dawn good. You had stuff like, you know, the killer was sporting like a very similar mask to like the slasher in the game, you know, like the psychopath. You had that going on, and again, you had Wendigos by name. You had like the setting of it being like a cabin deep in the woods, you know, and like a good cabin too, not like an Evil Dead cabin. It was like a
in the movie,
well-known one,
or in the game.
Like both of them had that. Like they were both cabins like out in the middle of the woods, and followed a group of teenagers looking for someone who's missing. It's what I mean by like that is kind of just the theme of this movie when you compare it to the game, in that there's a lot of similarities on the surface, but it doesn't really have much deeper connection.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And I feel, and that's
which is strange.
That's where it definitely seems like people start losing it in the second half, is because that's when the movie starts trying to explain the time loop and explain all this, and its explanations are its attempt, I saw it tying it into the game universe.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll just jump straight to the final scene of the movie. They essentially reveal that it's a prequel to Until Dawn, because the screen that show the visitor center our movie characters are at change to the cabin in the snow, and you see a car pull up, which I think only is to be taken as Until Dawn is now happening. And so I liked that, but it also adds so many questions.
Yeah, it's really confusing at that point, because again, like the same thing like you said, like that shows like the camera footage of what looks to be now, like at least as gamers knew, it was Josh's cabin that everything went down.
You see Josh's picture.
You see Josh's picture too. Yeah, and and there's other connections too, like the fact that it's literally Dr. Hill from the game. But like, I mean, I kind of just thought like at first that maybe it was just a cameo, that they had the actor be in there, but then they're like, no, it's Dr. Hill. And so because of that, again, it leaves more questions than it does answers to how it connects to the game, because now you have apparently Dr. Hill's involved, and like, I guess Until Dawn is going to start, even though like it's really confusing, I'll say. As a person who's played the game and seen the movie, it's very confusing. Granted, I haven't seen the ending for the remaster, so who knows? Maybe that, like, maybe there's a full-on connection now between the movie and the game. Maybe, I don't know, but
it feels like there's a way to, like, I guess, save the connections that they were trying to make. Like, it's there, I think, to where they could kind of like fix little things up that they did in this movie and twist it to fit more with the game, but then it starts feeling like you're grasping at straws, trying to save the movie from itself.
Yeah.
Which, another part of the second half that I liked a lot, but wanted more of, was that found footage segment we were talking about earlier. Because I know people don't like this very much, that they skipped. I know you weren't a big fan, that they skipped after night 3 and went straight to the end. It's kind of 50-50 for me. Like, I like the psychological aspect to where, like, our main character, like, you're kind of with them, at least I was with them in the confusion of, like, oh, that would really trip me out, to be like, oh, shit. Like, and they do mention that some people's limits may be different. So, like, who knows, character A could be done on night 6, but character B could last till night 20 and be fine, or that's when they start losing it. And so that I started liking, because then that, on top of the fact that they were losing track of days, I felt like was really working in the confusion. But then when they show the found footage moment on the guy's phone, because he was like, I recorded all that we don't remember, and we go through those kills, which were all like really cool, and so then it was like, oh, I wish you did more of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that, if anything, a lot of those moments on the phone were like the scariest parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Like you were
I
saying,
remember
that one weird creature that flies at the camera. I was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, there was that. There was the fucking like scene where the chick's got like the bug in her face.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like burrowing around, and then like she turns back and she's all like fucking, it looks like it straight up has infected her, body and everything. Like, that was cool too. I remember that was all over the trailers.
Yeah, and call me crazy,
too.
the way that it was like edited in the trailer, that scene was what was making me think the movie was gonna be too silly and just not good. And then when they showed in the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, this totally heightened it in this moment. Like, I really liked that moment. But at the same time, it's like, it didn't do enough for me.
It kind of does make me a little disappointed, and like, I don't like doing this with movies, because then if I applied this logic to every movie, then no movie's gonna be good. But my idea is like, I just kind of wish what they could have done with this found footage idea is like, maybe they could have done an entire, like, I guess, night, with it being in the found footage format. Because I feel like after you've seen it maybe 2 or 3 times, okay, you kind of got the idea. How can we keep it fresh? Well, why not just have an entire segment of it be found footage? Like, at that point, you're kind of like pushing the boundary, because it's like, yeah, you've been watching a movie. Now we're going to put you in the character's shoes with like a found footage thing. We're going to switch the, the dynamic up a little bit just to keep you on your toes. Like, not saying it would have saved the movie, but I feel like if they would have stuck to the loop a little bit more and did something like that, that probably could have really propelled this movie up quite a lot.
Yeah, which is crazy to think, because that essentially, the way I'm seeing it, is that this movie had such a cool concept that if it had stuck with and followed, it would have been really awesome, I think, if it kept with how awesome the first half was. And so at the end of the day, the only thing holding this back from being a really good horror film is the Until Dawn attachment. Like, the fact that they tried making it Until Dawn, that it was not going to work ever. And you had such a good horror concept, and the second half is where it starts trying to connect to Until Dawn, which theoretically is what people could want, but that should be the cool part. Yeah, that should be the part that's awesome, but that's where it's faltering. The Until Dawn part of the movie is what's holding it back from being like truly great in my eyes.
It kind of makes me wonder, just, was this movie meant to be like, was the initial script, the idea of like the time loop cabin, was that supposed to always be a part of the Until Dawn movie? Like, did they sit down and go, we're going to make an Until Dawn movie, go to the cabin? Or it wouldn't surprise me if like somebody was trying to make a completely separate movie where the idea is you go to this cabin, put you in a time loop of death, and then I guess some executive was like, oh, that sounds cool. Why don't you put the Until Dawn name on it? That'll get people to show up. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Or some shit like that. Like,
or kind of like what I was saying.
I don't know.
Not in this video, but earlier, to where this feels like the not, I guess, middle point in video game movies, to where you have, like, I guess I can't think of a horrible example. You have obvious movies.
Like a horrible video game movie?
Yeah, a horrible video game movie to where it's clear. Halo.
Borderlands.
Okay. Borderlands and Halo. More so with Halo, it's obvious they ignored everything from video game and they just wanted to do their own thing. And then you have like the better end, which is like your Fallout and Last of Us, where the people who made the game are a part of it. And so like you have trust that they know what they're doing. And then there's this, where it felt like they played the game once and then thought we could make a movie out of this. And it didn't really bother to go deeper than that.
Yeah, I feel like exactly what you said there. It feels like maybe they played the game once and they didn't understand it. Like, there were some interesting ideas and neat concepts in it, as we've stated throughout this entire video, and you could even apply it to the idea that it's a homage to the game. Like, the resetting is just like different playthroughs of the game, maybe, or something like that. And like, I don't know, like, you could maybe like get meta like to that degree, but I feel like it's not clear enough that you're pretty much caught in a video game from hell. The Until Dawn video game was meta for sure in a way, because it was kind of playing on your expectations and your knowledge of these tropes, but that's kind of what made it cool. Like, it was meta in a different way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
which more of our last thing we kind of wanted to get here was Dr. Hill, because he's basically the most connected part from game to movie, and
he pretty much is the connection. Yeah.
Because he's in the beginning, Peter Stormare, and then he's revealed that he is actually Dr. Hill from the video games. And I didn't mind this too much because it sounded like he was explaining that the area they're in changes based off of like someone's specific fears or traumas, which I know is the horror trope that gets used all the time now, is that it's the trauma is the horror all along.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like how it is in the game, to where Dr. Hill asks you, like, does the spider freak you out more? Does the snake scare you more? And then depending on what you choose, the game's supposed to change a little bit to, like, really scare you extra. And so that...
Yeah, like it adapts to you.
Yeah, so that felt like they were doing that in the movie, but just it wasn't as clear as it should have. It felt like an end, like, hey, we gotta make sure you understand what's going on here in the last like 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And I also don't mind that he was a bad guy, because in the game it's not really clear who he is or what his intentions are. He's a very vague character in all of the games because he's a repeating figure. And so I don't mind
he
that
only appears in Until Dawn.
Oh,
I
wait,
believe,
what?
But,
I thought that in most Dark Pictures game that there's that psychologist that comes in and talks to you.
That's a different guy. I think he's known as like the curator.
Oh,
is what he's known as.
I've gotten the curator and Dr. Hill confused.
Yeah, but I mean, they're both similar in that they're both very, I guess, proper men dressed up with that sinister ass smile putting you through a hell of a night. But
even in Until Dawn, though, Dr. Hill kind of has an oddness to him.
He does, and on that note, it's why I'm wondering, like, just about this depiction of him, because I think it's the chapter where you're running away from what we now know as Josh. Like, when you're playing as Sam, if you escape, like, Josh's attempt to kidnap you, I think you can find his cell phone, and it's revealed that, like, Dr. Hill, the text conversation that Josh has on his cell phone with Dr. Hill seems like Dr. Hill is much different than what he's portrayed like in both the movie and, like, his visual representation in the game. Because in the game, he seems kind of like a dick, like a sadistic Willy Wonka, where he's just, like, putting you through all this bullshit for no fucking reason, and he just finds delight in your suffering. But if you play the game, he seems like, when you read that conversation, he seems like he's more of your traditional therapist. Like, he seems like he's actually concerned for Josh's well-being, because Josh is like, he's having an episode, I think, in the text messages, and he's yelling at him and saying, like, leave me the fuck alone and stuff like that. And Dr. Hill's like, are you taking your meds, Josh? You need to calm down. Like, so that's why I'm wondering, like, I was a little confused about it, because at least to me it seemed like, okay, maybe Dr. Hill in reality is a normal individual, and Josh's depiction of him in his brain that we get to see, you know, is fucked up because Josh is, you know, insane in the membrane and stuff. But now that I see the movie, I'm like, okay, well, now I got two things telling me Dr. Hill's crazy. One is definitely a lot more crazy than the other.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that's strange. Like, his depiction is seemingly all over the place, and if this is the real Dr. Hill, then that's interesting on that end, that he seems like, I guess you could argue maybe in a way he was setting up Josh for this.
Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like.
Yeah, he's got Josh's file. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe he told Josh, like, hey, you need to get your friends together and go to the cabin. Maybe it's like part of your healing process. You know what I mean? And turns out he's just there, and like, this was all set up. But again, though, that then brings in the point of like, okay, well, if you want to make this a cohesive narrative, then why does Dr. Hill, like, not physically appear then like he did in the movie?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm probably asking too many questions.
But at the end of the day, I liked it, and like I said in the spoiler free, I'd put it on if I'm just looking to have fun.
Yeah.
But not really in other situations. And I also wouldn't put this in like the bottom of the barrel with other video game adaptations, but I definitely wouldn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't say it's up there with what we have been getting. This
Yeah, like
feels a
Sonic.
little this feels a little bit more like a retraction, but not as far as like I think people were fearing. I'm glad that this movie at least has the, for me, first two acts that really, really like shine and help it. But like I said earlier, the unfortunate ties to Until Dawn are what hold it back.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel with it too. I feel like had this movie been an entirely separate IP, like there's no Until Dawn connections, or even if they just called it a different movie and you didn't change anything, even that the dude's name is Dr. Hill, like there would have been interesting parallels, but it I feel like it would have helped the movie a lot more knowing that it's not connected to Until Dawn or something like that. Like if this movie was just its own thing, Until Dawn, like not the movie,
Yeah.
that would have been, I feel, much better. And like you said, I don't hate this movie. I've seen much worse movies, but I've also seen much better movies. I'd rather watch this than like Borderlands, but it's also not saying much. I'd rather watch Sonic than this. So it's like there's really no winning with this movie, which is sad. I mean, and like I said earlier in the review, I guess if you have a friend over and you guys just want to watch like people get blown up and smashed to bits, pop a couple beers or sodas and just have a night together, this is a pretty good movie for that. It'd be a lot of fun.
If you have seen Until Dawn already, definitely let us know what you thought. I'm curious. I feel like that's about it that I have to say for Until Dawn.
That's all I got to say about it too. Until Dawn wasn't really great. It wasn't really bad. I'll probably just play the video game instead.
Yeah, I'll play the game. But again, if you enjoy these type of movie reviews, we will keep doing them. But that's about it for this video. Be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below if you enjoyed it.
And we'll see you on the next video. Don't worry. We're cooking something for you. I'm not sure what it is, but we're still cooking. Don't you worry.
Yep.
Alrighty. Bye.